I'm not much of a political person. I don't care to share my politics. I don't really want to talk about politics. I don't want to discuss politics. I don't have a lot of interest in the politics of other people all that much. But it's just surreal living in this time in the United States of America where we've had multiple political assassinations that have been successful. Several have been attempted, some almost successful, some not successful, all happening in the last 5, 6 years on American soil. Like, that's just, it's hard to fathom. And the vitriol and the conversation around all of it, and people don't really come together anymore. They only just choose a side and stick with it. And some of it is just nasty. Some of it is just confusing, angering, sickening. And more than anything, it just feels more and more divisive. Like, I have a hard time understanding it. I have a hard time coming to grips with it. It's just a strange and difficult time that we live in. And I know that that's not really helpful to anybody. That's not really providing an answer or insight that you didn't already know. It's just, I don't know how to react to it anymore. I don't know how to, like, what to say or how to feel or what to think. But it just feels like there's no togetherness. It doesn't feel like we're all on one team anymore. And I don't know how to navigate that as a friend, as a person in the media, as a man, as a son. I don't know how to navigate it. I might have my beliefs about what I believe is right or wrong, but you know, just because someone feels differently than me, it doesn't mean I should lash out against them, that I should delete that person out of my life, that I should speak ill of them, or certainly not be violent towards them. I just don't understand. And I think we always focus on the wrong things. And I don't know, it's been on my mind. I'm sure it's been on your mind. There's been a lot going on the last couple days across the country. It's just, it doesn't feel like there's any solution that is close to working. Like, I don't know. I don't know what to do. It's scary. Keep yourself safe out there. Let's focus on stuff that's a lot more fun, like football. Here we go. Hi, hello, and welcome into episode number 151 of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. My name is Austin Elmore. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to this episode of the show or watching it if you're watching on YouTube. And I'm excited. The Bengals are 1-0, as you well know, and we've already got a week 2 in the NFL getting underway. As I'm recording this, we're about an hour and a half away from kickoff on Thursday Night Football between the Washington Commanders and the Green Bay Packers. We'll touch on that game early next week. But in this episode, we're focusing on the Bengals and the Jaguars. Cincinnati's home opener at 1 p.m. at Paycor Stadium on Sunday. It is the Open in Orange game for Cincinnati. You might remember they tried this last year with the home opener against New England, and they announced orange pants for the first time in franchise history. They wore them a handful of times last year, including in road games, which actually didn't look all that bad. But most notably in the open and orange game against New England, most people then said, okay, well, they're cursed. If you go orange jersey and orange pants and you lose the way you did to New England, that ain't going to work. So the Bengals actually tweaked it this year and are using the white pants with the orange jersey, which I think is their best uniform combination in the entire uniform set, and a uniform that has only been worn once, dating back to 2021. So the NFL has strict uniform rules and how many times you can wear alternates and helmets and blah, 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 blah. So the orange jersey in and of itself was kind of reduced from 2 games a year to 1 because of the whole whiteout situation. And the Bengals haven't released their uniform schedule for this year, which is very strange because they normally do that. But either way, they announced that the Bengals are going to wear orange jerseys with white pants. The last time they wore this uniform, it was a Thursday night football game, week 4, I believe, of the 2021 season at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was a matchup between two number 1 overall picks, Joe Burrow from 2020, Trevor Lawrence from 2021. You might remember a guy by the name of Urban Meyer as the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars that year. Things kind of went south for old Herb after that Thursday night loss to Cincinnati. So this game this weekend will be the first time the Bengals have worn that uniform combination since. I'm fired up. Everybody at Paycor Stadium expected to wear orange for the Bengals home opener. It is going to be an electric environment, and the weather is all of a sudden going to get hot again. All of a sudden going to get hot again. I heard upwards of 90, around 90 degrees. I think it's since cooled off a little bit. It's supposed to be around 80, 81 degrees at kickoff. It'll heat up a little bit between then and the end of the game, but it's going to be hot, going to be a little bit humid for the Bengals and Jags on Sunday, which is, we do this every year. We do this every single year where it's perfect outside for like a week. It's like 50 to 62 degrees, and everybody loves it. Everyone's happy, and it feels like fall. And then the front porch of hell returns the following week, and it's hot all over again. That's kind of what I'm afraid we're about to experience with the Bengals, and certainly with the weather this week in Cincinnati. But it's going to be a clear day. Not going to have a bunch of wind, not going to have any precipitation. Going to be a clear day, just going to be really warm for the Bengals and Jags at 1 p.m. at Paycor Stadium. So let's talk about it. Joe Burrow against the Jacksonville Jaguars. How good is he? Well, he's faced them twice in his career, in 2021, as I mentioned previously, and in his rookie year in 2020. That was actually the first win Joe Burrow got as a professional quarterback, happened in that 2020 season over the Jags. In his career, Joe has a 2-0 record with a 73% completion percentage in those two games, 648 yards, which, as you know, averages out to 324 yards per game, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception in those two games. Burrow has done pretty well against Trevor Lawrence's Jacksonville Jaguars even before Lawrence got there as well. And I think the Bengals are going to want to bounce back with their offense this week. Obviously, it did not perform well, but like all the metrics, the way that the Bengals performed against Cleveland last year offensively is one of the worst offensive outputs of all time for a team that won a game. It's actually completely against the norm for them to have won that game, considering all the stats and all the history of the NFL, but they found a way to win it, which, if you go back to last year, the Bengals kind of are deserving or due or are owed a few of those bounces going their way, and that's exactly what happened. Cincinnati altogether, going back to last year, has won 6 straight regular season games, and this is going to be a tough game for them. If you've been listening to our show, if you've listened to this podcast at all, you know that I think Jacksonville has the firepower to have a tough matchup against Cincinnati, especially the weapons they have on the outside. Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, the Heisman Trophy winner, Travis Hunter. They've got Travis Etienne in the backfield. They've got a really good young tight end by the name of Brenton Strange, who I think is going to play a big role in this game. And they, of course, have some good players on defense as well, including Foye. Let me say this. How do I say it? Did I say it right? Let me write Foye Oluokun. Foye Oluokun, who was a monster this past week against Carolina. They've also got Josh Hines-Allen, one of their top picks in recent years, as well as a great edge rusher. So matchup-wise, I don't think this is nearly as bad of a matchup for the Bengals as the Browns are, but I do think it's a matchup where it can cause some problems for the Bengals defense. That's what I'm worried about, the prolific offense that is Jacksonville. Now, I'm a big fan of Liam Cohen, the Jacksonville Jaguars head coach. I'm a big fan of Brian Thomas Jr., as you know, and I think that in and of itself could get cooking and make an impact, have an impact on this season. Well, I'm glad that the Bengals are playing Jacksonville early, just game number 2 of Liam Cohen's head coaching career with the Jags. Still trying to get some of that stuff. It's never easy. The home opener in Cincinnati, the crowd's going to be wild. Those things all work in the Bengals' advantage, but I still have my doubts on whether or not what we saw in Cleveland is really who this defense is. If they're going to want to win this game, they're going to have to come up with some timely turnovers For sure. What did Jacksonville do last week? Well, they dominated Carolina. 26-10 the final score. Now, you look at the numbers statistically from Trevor Lawrence, he was 19 of 31, 178 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Those don't jump off the screen at you by any stretch of the imagination, especially when you consider that Brian Thomas Jr. was hardly involved at all. He carried the ball for an 11-yard touchdown run, but really did nothing else. Travis Hunter had a minimal impact in the game as well. But the thing is, Jacksonville ran the ball for 200 yards behind Travis Etienne, and that is obviously going to be an issue for the Bengals. Now, the Bengals put up, statistically, the best game they've ever had against the run in the Zach Taylor era up against the Cleveland Browns last week. Just in general, I expect a little bit of a fall-off. Jacksonville has a good enough offensive line. We'll touch on that in the injury report, and obviously 200 yards on the ground. We know the game plan for teams is going to be to shorten it, to eat up some clock, to run the football, long, sustained drives, keep Joe, Jamar, and T off the field. That's exactly what I expect. And so I think it's going to be a difficult game for the Bengals. Every team is going to try to grab them and drag them down in the mud with them and muck up every single game that they play. I expect Jacksonville to try to establish the run for sure. And really, when I look at how the game's going to go as a whole, I know what Jamar Chase said and how he had a very small impact on the game, basically no impact on the game for the Bengals last week. Same for Brian Thomas Jr., both of them LSU wide receivers. I think the game plan for both of these offenses early is going to be to get the ball to their star wide receivers. Number one, you can't have a game where Jamar Chase only has a couple of receptions for 40 yards or whatever it is. You need to force feed him. He needs 10 to 15 targets a game at the minimum. And I'm sure Jags fans feel the same about Brian Thomas just because of the raw talent that he has and continuing to develop. So I think both teams are going to try to get their star LSU wide receivers involved early and often in the offense and to get some rhythm and momentum going for those receivers to see if they could potentially take over the game. That's what I think the early offensive game plans for these teams will be. And obviously with Jacksonville, I would expect them to run the ball quite a bit as well. And Cincinnati, it's interesting. And I'm worried about this for the Bengals because after that opening drive where Chase Brown was so effective, they did basically nothing the rest of the game offensively. They still need to be impactful in the run game. I hope that they don't abandon the run this early in the season and certainly don't abandon the run early in this game against Jacksonville, and they stay committed to the identity that they are and who they want to be and the parts of the offense that they've spent the offseason building around Chase Brown. That needs to remain a priority. I'm not saying he needs to be Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but the idea of running the football dependably and consistently has to remain a big part of the Bengals offense. Earlier this week, Joe Burrow met with the Bengals media, not the Bengals media, but the local media that covers the Bengals. One of the talking points this week were the pre-snap issues that the Bengals faced in Cleveland. Joe had to burn 3 timeouts at the line of scrimmage, and he was asked about those pre-snap issues and the communication and what went wrong and how they can fix it this week.
I'm not sure we had many communication issues on Sunday. I think we called 2 timeouts. One we lined up in the wrong formation, and I can't remember what happened on the other one. But aside from that, I feel like our operation and communication was pretty sound on Sunday.
As we talked about in the last episode, not the best game for Joe Burrow, just 113 yards through the air. The theme of talking with the Bengals players this week is that they felt like they left a lot of plays out there that they would like to have back that could have changed that game and been a much more dominant win for them. Joe was also asked about what he wants to do better this week compared to last week against Cleveland.
I'm going to be a little more aggressive to maybe get out of the pocket and make some plays. Just like every game, you want to get out and see how things are going. How's the defense playing you? How's their front playing? What coverages are we getting? How are we attacking them so far, and how is it going? Do we need to change? Do we need to keep attacking them the way that they are? So I'm going to be ready to adapt for whatever we see.
And finally, Burrow was asked about the Jacksonville defense and the Jags in general, what they showed last week against Carolina, what impressed them, and what the Bengals have to be ready for ahead of this game.
You can see their energy and physicality on defense. I think their front is very disruptive. Feels like I say that every week, but they have a lot of guys that I respect on that front, and they came up with some big time defensive plays. They safety drove a low cross on a naked and popped it up in the air, and guy made a diving interception, and they punched the ball out I think they were up maybe 10 or 14, and Carolina was driving. They punched the ball out and got a fumble recovery. Those are big time plays, so those are things that you always have to be aware of, but they put it on tape, so that's something that we've discussed.
That is Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow meeting with the media earlier this week. Joe obviously good to go for Sunday. Let's take a quick look at the injury report. Still pretty light for the Bengals. Now, this is the injury report as of Thursday afternoon. B.J. Hill did not practice Thursday. No issues, not injury related. He's getting a veteran rest day. The Bengals defensive tackle played very well against Cleveland on Sunday. William Wagner, the rookie long snapper, also on the injured list or on the injury report this week, but he was a full participant in practice both Wednesday and Thursday, nursing a hamstring injury. The most notable and concerning injury for Cincinnati would be starting right tackle Amarius Mims. Mims is listed on the injury report with an ankle injury. He was limited in practice on Wednesday, limited in practice on Thursday. Now, whenever you practice 2 days in a row, that's generally a good sign, even if it's in a limited fashion, but something to keep an eye out on for the Bengals this weekend. As for Jacksonville, 2-3 notable injuries. They've got a few guys banged up. Looks like most of them are going to play, but one cropped up on Thursday, and it was the guy I was talking about earlier, linebacker Foye Oluokun. He was on the injured list with an illness, or on the injury report. I'm still in baseball mode from my other job. He was on the injury report with an illness and did not practice Thursday. Again, he was a monster against Carolina over the weekend. Offensive lineman starter Wyatt Milam had a knee injury. He did not practice Wednesday or Thursday. His status remains unclear for Sunday. And cornerback Monteric Brown with a knee injury. He was limited both Wednesday and Thursday this week. So both teams, for the most part, relatively healthy. You would imagine that Oluokun will be good to go with an illness. If it's happening on Thursday, by Sunday you would think he's good to go. And Wyatt Milam, I could be saying his name wrong. Either way, that could be a big one. A starting offensive lineman for Jacksonville, if he's unable to go, would be big for the Bengals and their ability to rush the passer. A couple of notes earlier this week, the Bengals made some roster moves. We'll finish up the show with this. They signed defensive tackle Mike Pennell off the practice squad and to the active roster. This is not a good sign for third-round pick McKinley Jackson from a year ago. They have also placed guard Lucas Patrick on the injured reserve list with a designation to return. That means it'll be at least 4 games until Lucas Patrick returns. That means Dalton Reisner will start at right guard for the Bengals on Sunday. They've also signed 2 defensive ends to the practice squad, defensive end Miles Cole and former Notre Dame defensive end Isaiah Foskey, who spent time with Al Golden at Notre Dame. And finally, in a corresponding move, they released defensive end Isaiah Thomas from the practice squad. Everybody seemingly good to go for the Bengals and the Jags coming up on Sunday. We'll see you again on, what is it going to be, Wednesday, for an update after week 2, recapping the Bengals game, and then again next Friday or Saturday getting set for week number 3 in the National Football League. Thank you so much for being here and for listening to this episode of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. If you liked what you heard, you can hear me weekdays from noon to 3 on ESPN 1530. I co-host a show called Cincy 360 with Tony Pike. You can also follow me on all social media at Auty Elmore. That's AUTYELMORE. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We'll talk to you again next week. And as always, have fun, be safe, go Bucks.